This is a traditional Czech dumpling, and this is traditional Czech fried cheese. But Czechs would never eat this together. Today's video undertitle is Czechs would never. And yes, it will be full of stereotypes and things that we think, but if there's one thing we're certain about is that nobody would ever eat these two things together. We actually asked at the counter if it ever occurred, and they said, yes, some people, some foreigners, tourists do it. And I said, and Czechs? They said, Czechs would never. Objednal si někdo z Čech takovouhle kombinaci?
Třeba někdo z rýži, já taky.
Ale Čech si tohle někdy objednal? Ne.
Slováci třeba z rýži.
Slováci z rýži, yeah? So therefore we're here to help with today's video. Now, if you want to enjoy the dumpling, go for it, but it's dry. So you want to have it with something like a sauce. If you want to have the fried cheese, go for it, but as a side to it, you want to have fries. And now, in the beginning, you saw me holding the dumpling in my hand, and I see tourists do that a lot. They would grab the dumpling and sort of dip it in the sauce. Well, Czechs would never. We would use a fork and a knife, silverware, because tourists think it's a bread. No, it's a dumpling, and you cut it, you drown it in the sauce, and then you eat it. Now, maybe what confuses the tourist is that this is called bread dumpling. So let's just drop the whole dumpling thing, because I believe that this is actually a dumpling. Let's just call it knedlík. But hey, we're Czechs and this is dry, so let's wash it down with something. Ideally, a great Czech beer, right? Well, Czechs would never drink this beer. Why? Well, it has no head, no foam. What is this? It actually has a name and you can order it in certain pubs. It would be called csochtan. It has no foam, no head at all. I've never seen anyone order it. You can do it, but no, a beer, proper beer, has a head, has a foam, and that's how you can tell it's good. It's weird. It's also non-alcoholic because we're filming this at 10:30 a.m. Also, speaking of beer, I cannot imagine a Czech would ever say about any other beer that it's the best. Ours is always the best. And now, not to waste food, here's the hard part of today's video, and that is, how are we going to eat this? Exactly. If you just tuned in, here's Janek from the Honest Guide, sampling a dumpling together with fried cheese. And I'd rate this, I'd say like 1 out of 10. Separately, it's good. Together, no. Czechs would never wait to be seated. Yes, there are exceptions, restaurants that will have a sign, please wait to be seated, usually in English as well. But in a normal pub like this one, we see a free space and we just sit down. The only thing that will stop us from sitting down and talking to the waiter and asking them, can we sit down, is this little sign that says reserved. Then we will not sit. Other than that, we're not waiting to be seated. This is very different for us, especially when I go to US. I remember I would always walk past the sign or I would walk into a restaurant and sit down, especially when it was all empty. And they would look at me like, can you wait to be seated? I'm like, okay. And then they would ask me, where do you want to sit? I'm like, see, it's pointless. Honza is nodding behind the camera like, exactly, he just came back from US. We would never leave a tip on the table. We do tip, don't get me wrong, but not like leaving some change or coins. We always give them the final price and we usually round up. So we just had a meal with Honza. It was 370 crowns, so I rounded it up to 400. Just recently, we got a new addition to our city, and that's the butterfly Spitfires behind me. And all the tourists are super excited about it. You know what us locals are excited about? That they reopened the Tesco. Oh, and as we ride down, one more thing that Czechs would never, and that is stand on the left on an escalator. You stand on the right, walk on the left. Czechs would never buy water. Don't get me wrong, they would, but not in a pack of 40 small bottles, like is common and normal and usual, for example, in US. Honza just experienced it.
We buy this every like 2 days or so. So much rubbish, so much waste. This is something I never understood. I honestly think that the thing we have in Czech is better.
But if you want more water, you can get a 6-pack. This one right here will cost you 1.7 euros. Compare that to the touristy mini market where it costs 34 euros. Not a joke, not a mistake. 34 euros in the touristy mini market, 1.7 right here. Unlike tourists, Czechs would never throw away an empty bottle. We actually bring them back to the supermarket because we know there is a 3-crown deposit and this lovely machine that you put it in and you get your little receipt. Us Czechs, we love our spreads, and this is the aisle full of them. I'm gonna pick one of my favorite ones, which is vlašský salát. Now, back in the days, you would order these over the counter, so you would have to ask how much you want. And despite the fact that the weight is in grams, the price used to be per 100 grams, you would never use grams. You would always ask for deka. So for example, if you would want to order this, you would say 15 deka, please. You would never say, so Czechs would never say 150 grams, please. But Czechs would eat this. But never just this. You need something to eat this with, and that something is a Czech roll. By the way, these two little babies in a snack cost under €1. And if you want the honest guy to be honest, a perfect snack. Only at Tesco. Czechs would definitely never head out to shop without bringing their own bag, not only to reduce waste, but also so they don't have to buy a new one, because this one not only is reusable, but it expands a lot. We've created this episode in the partnership with Tesco, and I would like to thank you for that. Not only for the partnership, but for the fact that you've reopened this store in the city center. You've been missed. We needed you. For normal locals to buy something normal in the city center was very hard without you. So thank you for coming back, and for you, sir, it will be €1. By the way, they do accept euro at Tesco at a very good rate. This around me is the old town square full of tourists, and Czechs would never go here. Now, sadly, the reason is there's nothing to do here for locals or Czechs. But when I said they would never, there's one exception, and that is what's this square most associated with for the locals or for the Czechs, and that is if we win an ice hockey. Then the tourists have to move out and the Czechs move in because they await the arrival of the ice hockey team. We have experienced it this year when the players showed up on the square and it filled up with Czechs, and it was pretty cool. Czechs would never be able to explain how the astronomical clock actually works. Yes, it is a bold statement, but we did fact check it. Dokážete vysvětlit, jak funguje orloj?
Tak to ne.
To ne, jo? Dokážete vysvětlit, jak funguje orloj?
No to asi nedokážu.
Nedokážete? Dokázal byste mi vysvětlit, jak funguje orloj? Nedokázal. Fact checked. Not only we asked the few Czechs we found on the square, but we can test it on ourselves. A couple years ago, before we were making these videos, I would have no idea how to read the clock. I had to look it up. It's not something they teach us at school. Nada. More tourists probably know how the clock works than locals. Do you know how the clock works?
We have a bit of an idea, but not much.
Okay, where did you learn about it?
On your video.
On our video. The reason more tourists are actually able to explain the clock is because they're being explained by the tour guides. And we as Czechs were never explained at school. Now, we also asked you, our viewers, if you could help us with Czechs would never, finish the sentence, please. And this is what you wrote. Czechs would never wear shoes at home. Yes, that is correct. We always take our shoes off, even if it's a summer dry day, shoes off. I used to wear shoes at home because I'm used to it from US and I kind of like it, and I always clean up, and then I found a girlfriend and she was like, no. Czechs would never ask, can I bring my dog to the restaurant? Yes, this may be weird, but dogs in pubs and restaurants in general are just a common thing and nobody really asks. They just kind of walk in, and if it is a problem, they'll be sent out. But I rarely see people ask, can we bring our dog in? They just walk in. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Czechs would never talk money. Partially, I agree with that. We rarely talk about how much money we earn, what is the salary, and so on. It's kind of like a secret. Czechs would never smile at a stranger. You wrote that to our Instagram, and I totally disagree. Look at me, I'm a Czech, you're a stranger, and I'm smiling at you. So yes, it is true, but we're trying to change that. If there's one video where I'm looking forward to the discussion, it is this one, especially because we make these videos in English and also in Czech. So I'm very curious what the discussion will look like. The topic for today's discussion is Czechs would never. Please finish the sentence. Thanks again to Tesco for partnering with us, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget your €1 snack. €1 snack, 1 million euro view. I'll see you guys next week. This is, by the way, delicious, man. For the first time today, I tried to be a cashier, which in Czech is pokladní. Pokladní is cashier. Either if it's a man or a woman, same word, pokladní.